Welcome to the Adventure Pro podcast. Interviews, stories, and inspiration from amazing people that have made adventure their business. Today on the Adventure Pro podcast, we have Dan Ty. Dan runs a website, an online blog called Adventure 52. Welcome to the podcast, Dan. Would you like to give us a little background into you and your fantastic website?
Thanks, Tom. So I'm Dan. I live up near Glasgow now, and my main job is working as a pilot for Loganair on the Twin Otter plane. As Tom mentioned, Adventure 52 has kind of been a labour of love for me. Something that I launched 11 years ago now, pretty much to the month. So it's been a long-standing thing that's kind of grown organically over that time. With many trials and tribulations and squeezing it in between various careers. So it'd be great to kind of talk to you and tell you a bit about kind of the journey that I've had with that.
Fabulous. So you say 11 years ago. So what did life look like before that, Dan, 11 years ago?
So I was working as a journalist. So I first got kind of my gig in journalism with Motorcycle News, which is sort of a weekly newspaper. And I'd gone into that with kind of no journalistic experience, save for kind of writing a few articles for an RAF magazine. And then I kind of did training on the job there. And I mean, what a great job, you're surrounded by people who are all into motorbikes. That's kind of a big passion of mine as well. A lot of people there shared that same adventurous spirit as well. So that was kind of my foot in the door to the world of journalism and creativity and working on kind of newspapers, magazines. And it was around that time kind of websites were just starting to become popular, and a lot of publishers were trying to decide, how do we move forward from here? How do we make money online? It's great that a physical magazine you can sell and make your money. It's pretty straightforward. But, with websites back then, it was quite a different story. It was still in its infancy. And I guess then from there, I moved on to a aviation magazine. So aviation was one of my other sort of passions. A bit of a theme here, anything kind of that goes fast or has an engine. That was great. I mean, I was working with a brilliant team. They were kind of like a startup as well, where it was actually a free newspaper which was distributed around flying clubs up and down the country and posted out to aircraft owners, and that kind of made their money really from advertising. So you didn't have to buy the magazine, it was just purely advertising. And then that led on to other opportunities, and I became deputy editor of Pilot magazine. So that was great for me because one, it was a passion. I was able to write about my passion. And being a journalist just opens up so many opportunities, and if you're good at storytelling and you're creative, then it's just an ideal job really. But kind of, so again, websites were kind of appearing, smartphones were coming out with apps. Excuse me. And I was kind of meeting more and more like-minded people, so people who were kind of into flying. Perhaps they loved trail running. You could talk to them about skiing, you could probably talk to them about motorcycling. And I started to kind of realize there's a kind of these adventure people that liked all these different things, whether it was rock climbing, and I kind of was thinking to myself, well, there isn't really a adventure lifestyle publication out there. There's individual climbing magazines, and you pick your particular sport, or like a hill walking magazine, but there wasn't anywhere or anything that kind of combined all these different facets of adventure. So I thought, well, wouldn't it be great to kind of like have this like adventure themed magazine? And 11 years ago, that wasn't so much of a concept, but now there's so many different publications out there focusing on adventure and adventure lifestyle. So I mean, that's great to see, because that just fuels the industry as a whole. So I kind of took a bit of a gamble. I'd come been working at Pilot Magazine in my spare time. Then I was kind of researching how to build a website. Um, Initially, my kind of business plan was it would be like a weekly magazine, but like a digital one. So at the time, there was a lot of these digital page turners, and I don't know if you remember, there was one called Monkey Magazine. It used to come out every Monday, and it was kind
I
of a
don't,
bit of
yeah.
like, yeah, it was a bit of like a lads mag, bit of kind of like loaded, with kind of videos embedded in, and it was all kind of, well ahead of its time. And I kind of, that was sort of my initial vision for it. And I thought, well, I'll make money from this. If I charge like a fee, it'd be behind a paywall. And well, I did sort of the first, 3 months, and just wasn't getting the pickup I needed. And my funds were running out rapidly. And it kind of 6 months in, I realized, okay, I'm not making any money from this. This is great to work on, but I'm not making any money on it. So had to kind of rethink. And that's when I kind of got a job working down in London, actually, for Auto Trader. So I was back writing about bikes, but this time writing about cars as well, and vans. And also just being down in London, you were kind of a bit nearer some of like the industry and contacts. So kind of a change of tack, but I always thought, well, I can kind of keep this thing ticking over in the background, and then find another way forward for it. And well, here I am 11 years on, it's still going. Is it where I want it to be? No, not yet, but that's kind of part of the journey. And I'm definitely a lot closer to where I was 11 years ago.
Brilliant. Well, that's sounds like a fascinating journey. I'm intrigued because I remember, and I still subscribe to a few online magazines, but I don't pay anything for them. They just come through, and I'm always intrigued to know. Well, I know how much work it goes into publishing things, and I understand the basics of things like affiliate marketing and such. But is that really how things work? I mean, how do these online magazines that I'm subscribed to, how do they make any money? That sounds like a basic question, but
Yeah, well, you've hit it on the head. A lot of it is now affiliate marketing. So where you've got like a product either that you've reviewed or you've been sent, and you can either work out a link directly with that person. There's other ways of doing it. You can charge a fee to place a link or a website link in a story. Um, uh, you can make money just from the page views, so you can set up to kind of Google AdSense. So I mean, the technology now, in fact, is just so clever, where it works out where your audience has come from, what they've been looking at. You can just tell the website to serve whatever ads you want. And
yeah,
you know it's funny, isn't it? Because we all look at websites these days. How often do you actually click on an advert when you see something pop up? Um, I think it's quite rare, but
yeah,
sometimes there is something that you see. And I've particularly found, and you probably as well, Tom, when I don't know, been looking for like a new pair of hiking boots, and then you visit Mammut website or Scarpa website, and then sure enough, when you start looking at all these other different places, you'll see an advert for Scarpa, or Ellis Brigham appears, and it's got the boots you were looking at. So
yeah.
um, that kind of world is fascinating now, and it's moved away from kind of the traditional banner advertising that you used to perhaps do, where it was almost a bit like advertising in a magazine. You'd say, oh, do you want a homepage takeover, or do you want to kind of partner up on something, or do you want to sponsor a particular section of the website? um, but yeah, it's tough. And if you're doing it by yourself in particular, you know you've kind of got one brain cell working out all the content you need to write. But then if you want to make money, then you need another brain cell or a completely different hat to
Mm.
have those advertising conversations. So yeah, I think you perhaps actually need to make proper money. you need like a team of people, and you
Yeah.
need a bit of money behind it. Um, but yeah, it's a tough gig. It's always changing, and it's even just keeping up on top of the latest trends. But there are people out there where you can find information, either on blogs. There's a guy called Pat Flynn. I don't know if you've
I'm very aware of Pat. Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
yeah. So a lot of Pat's content is really useful,
Yeah.
and can often give you kind of a bit of motivation if you're a bit of stuck in something.
Yeah. His podcast is one of my go-to podcasts as well. I've followed him for years and years. He's a fascinating guy and super nice as well. Oh, cool. I mean, as I'm sure you know, the whole premise of this podcast is really it's to sort of share people's journeys, following their passion. Really, myself, I followed my passion. I've had a wonderful career in the adventure industry, not in this particular side of things, but more in guiding people. Um, and I'm always interested to take people on a journey, as to sort of someone's thinking about starting a blog, because there are some people out there that would say, well, blogs, starting blogs is something that was possible 10 years ago, 20 years ago, etc., etc. But I still think, and I truly believe, that there's still an opportunity there to start a blog and actually generate an income there. I'm just interested to know, what would your advice to be someone starting out? Sort of what would you say to them? They've gone and got that domain, they've got their website, they've got an idea. What do they do next? What are the next steps?
Yeah, what a brilliant question. It comes down to creativity, I think, and you know, if you want to bring in the traffic, just get people reading your stuff, perhaps from kind of Google search. Now, this way, you can kind of, find what people are searching for in the adventure industry, and then, write your content or your headlines to suit. But that's kind of great from bringing in traffic to your site point of view. But often I found with that, they come in, they read the content, or they're there for a few 20, 30 seconds to skim read whatever, and then they disappear again. So I think, with a blog, you can almost be a bit more magazine like, and a bit more creative, and a bit more personal. And I think those personal recommendations on kits, particularly in the adventure world, or courses, experiences, there are people out there that still kind of want to read that kind of content, or see amazing photos. Or I think for me, it's about information that's useful or inspiring. And that's one of the joys of reading a magazine. And I grew up just thumbing through magazines, whatever it was in, whether it's motorcycles, aeroplanes, skiing. I always felt that when I read a magazine, I'd kind of come away and I've like either learned something or I've been inspired to do something. That is a little bit more tricky online, kind of with a blog. But I think if you can kind of have a niche, find your tone of voice, would be the second thing, then yeah, I think you can still do it.
Brilliant. And we chatted earlier before we press record, and you were talking about social media, and the social media world 11 years ago was very, very different to what it looks like now. And certainly I felt the pinch in my business. I'll give you an example. I decided to focus on Facebook. That was my thing. I was going to build my following on Facebook. And then overnight, Facebook switched to switch, clicked to switch. And that was it. Everything changed. And then my business had to pay a lot more for ads and such to get the coverage that I was doing and get the reach. I'm interested to know, how much is your online brand sort of building on social media, and what does that how does that link into your blog, and how do you use it and how don't you use it?
It's a great question. I'm probably a bit of a rebel here, because I prefer people going to the website. So Now, it might mean that I've got fewer people, but across all of the social channels, it does take a lot of time and a lot of effort. And my ultimate aim is I want people looking on my website. Um, if they're on social media and I'm giving away all of that information, all of those good little nuggets that we all kind of read from time to time, then it's sort of lost in the ether and it's gone, and then they're flicked onto something else. So, but equally, I know that perhaps if I don't do that, then I'm missing out on reaching the people that I need to reach.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a chicken and an egg situation. But I kind of take solace that when people do sort of find Adventure 52, and I can see it in the stats where I get kind of returning visitors, that they check in, a couple of times a week just to see, what's been published. So it's something I battle with all the time. I think, God, I really should be doing a lot more on social media. And, probably like you, I'm watching videos of the latest trends. There's quite a lot of people on YouTube now where they can kind of tell you the latest trends and what's happening and how the algorithms are changing. And I don't know, it just, as you said, you end up having to spend quite a lot of money to get the people to see what you need them to see, or to even find your page. And I think I'd much rather kind of initially anyway put my time into the website and writing the content, particularly when you've got limited time. So, but again, it's something that I have to work on as well, and I know I need to work on it. But I'm just a bit wary of perhaps giving everything away for free on
Yeah.
social media. And at any point those things possibly could shut down. Okay, a lot of people say that, but it takes a lot of creative energy, and I think we said this before it came on. The juice needs to be worth the squeeze. So I think if I really wanted
That's
to.
a wonderful line, by the way. It's great.
Thanks. I think I heard it in a film before.
Oh, that's
I'll have
great.
to look it up, but that's a good question to kind of ask yourself whenever you sit down to kind of start a piece of work, or you're thinking about, well, what do I do next? Just to kind of spend a few moments thinking, okay, right, if I put this time in, what are the benefit, what are the results, what am I going to get from it?
Yeah. Yeah, because I'm fascinated by social media. I am, and maybe I'm fascinated in a controlled way, in that I'm not really a social media addict as such. I use it as a business tool, and I think it's very easy to think that, oh, that's going to be what I'm going to focus my marketing efforts on, for example. And over the past few years, I've decided to focus on email marketing. So my thing is collecting emails, and I know the value of email marketing now, and I've seen it in my business and completely transformed the way I do things. That's not to say I don't use social media to drive traffic. I do, and to keep people in the loop. But I think, yeah, there's a lot of wasted time when you could be creating content, like real content, not a pretty photo, but content writing and other things, and so many wonderful ways in which you can do that now. So the running of of your website, what does that look like day to day, and how long do you spend doing it now, and building content there?
So I fit it in around like the flying job up here. So I mean,
Which we will come on to later. Oh.
okay, cool. I mean, that's an adventure in itself. So yeah, I get my roster published on the 10th of each month, so I can kind of see a month in advance of when my flights are, and then I kind of work my time out around that.
Yeah.
And then I get lots of different opportunities coming through, some that I just can't go to because either I'm flying, or perhaps they're kind of at the part of the country and I'm just not going to be able to get down there and back again, which is a shame. But for the most part, I kind of, every opportunity that comes my way, I'll take it. And then, of course, sort of on days off, being up in Glasgow, I'm right near the hills. So 2 hours from here, I can be up in Glencoe. 2 hours south, I can be down in the Lake District. And, I can, hiking's really what I spend most of my time doing outside of Adventure 52. And then that's kind of the perfect ground for, either getting a new route, getting great photos. I mean, I've got the photos for social media, just to sort of loop back a bit. It's just I've got this massive library. I think, if I ever got someone to come in and perhaps take care of my social media, I'd just chuck in this big photo album and go, there you go.
Yeah.
And they'll be like, oh my goodness, this guy's got tons of content. So yeah, and it's just a case of on a daily basis, really, like going through the emails, seeing what press releases have come in, how I can what stories I want to kind of choose, what I prefer. I don't like regurgitating press releases. I like kind of putting everything into my own words. So the news story just sounds different because it is, sometimes the press you could get sections copied and pasted and you just end up reading the same old thing. So I like to kind of try and be a bit different where I can. Other times I get opportunities where I know that very few publications have been offered that. And then one example is the Grenadier car, the new 4x4, which is coming out. So I got the chance to kind of have a passenger drive in that a couple of months ago, and that was up in Scotland. They did a bit of a tour around the country. So I tend to focus my time, and I'll do kind of a big feature, and kind of probably a bit old school, like be a 2,000 word feature, which takes a lot of time, and picture captions and that long form reading. I don't know, it probably gets harder to get people's attention these days because a lot of people prefer to watch videos.
Yeah.
And I'm guilty of that. Oh my God, I'm an absolute YouTube addict. And
yeah, I'm me.
I'm just, I mean, like go down one rabbit hole into the other. It's amazing. There's, a lot of people doing some cool content out there. So yeah, really, it's to go back to how I manage my time. It's I'll often write I'm a list writer, so that's another like habit that I've got, and then I'll kind of write down a list, but often I won't get to the bottom of the list. I mean, I'm staring at one on my desk right now, and I'm looking, thinking, God, I really perhaps need to write about that, and really need to write about that. But I think as that with just one of you, it's very easy to burn yourself out, and so you kind of pick and choose your battles. And I guess you learn that over time.
Yeah. Just a side note, are you a paper guy? Do you write on the?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Let's see what I've got. Moleskin on my desk.
Lovely. Yeah. Classic. Brilliant. Yeah. I'm all about the paper. So you're throwing out some words there, a couple of words there that I'm particularly interested in, because when I've worked with some bigger clients, particularly with some charities, I've done some work for some charities, and they've mentioned press releases. And excuse my ignorance, but what exactly is a press release, and where does it come from? Where does it go to? Where's it generated? Could you give us, because this is your background, I'm intrigued.
Yeah, so okay, most sort of charities or big businesses will have a person in charge of their kind of PR or press relations. So it will be their job to kind of talk to the company, and they'll maybe be working on different things. They'll have some big news to talk about, and then it's up to this person to go, right, okay, how do we let people know about what we're doing? So for kind of online blogs, there's a lot of, well, not a lot, but there's a couple of like press release syndication companies. So there's one called Agility, there's another Cision Media, Gorkana. So what you can do, if you've got a blog, you can kind of go to these websites and create a profile, tell them who you are, all the different subjects that you write about, and lo and behold, your email address gets added to kind of mailing lists, and you can then find out about people's news. And that's often how you have that initial contact with a brand as well.
Yeah, because that is a real top tip, actually. I've used Google Trends before, and Google keyword. You know, when you sign up to specific keywords that come in, and then you get a notification. I found that to be really useful in the past, but that is top tip. I shall definitely be looking that up. And in terms of these, because I've been on your website, obviously had a look around, and a few of the brands, like they're big, serious brands that they're not they're not one man band sort of thing, with the Ineos big. How do you pronounce that again? Ineos.
Ineos Grenadier.
Yes, Grenadier. That's it. Yeah, with their I saw some photos from the work you did there. How do those brand relationships come about? What is the process to get you started with that? Is it all different, or is it just luck, or is it how does it work?
It's a little bit of luck. It's a little bit of being a good egg. It's also, I mean, what I mentioned earlier, those kind of sites where you can, make links, make contacts. So
Yeah,
another kind of good website, particularly in the car world, and as you probably know, the car and adventure side of things, cars, or most brands use adventure or adventure lifestyle in their advertising. That they want to kind of portray this particular, this is what we do at the weekend, drive
yeah,
our car there. So yeah, that website's called News Press. So you can kind of access a list of all of the PR managers, or just key figures at various brands, various companies,
yeah,
and then it's down to you from there. So you can make contact, introduce yourself, say this is me, this is what I do, and then in time, I guess, that if they see you're doing good coverage, and they might say, well, do you want to come along and do this, or we're holding an online event, do you want to tune in for it? So I mean, so tomorrow night I've just had an email. There's a Swedish brand called Klattermusen. I don't know if
right,
they're kind of like a clothing company. So they're doing like an online screening of a film tomorrow night, and a bit of a run through of all of their sort of fall winter campaign. And it's just little things like that where once you've established your blog, and you've got content up there, you're doing it consistently, and you're kind of making contact or showing people like, this is me, this is like how I do things, this is my tone of voice, and then just take it from there.
yeah, brilliant. Fabulous stuff. I'm sure there's lots of people out there, myself included. I've sent off the emails to, my niche. I do lots of cycling trips currently, road cycling maybe, mainly, and I've sent off the email to Rafa and all of the big brands saying, oh hi, is there any way we could team up together? And I've used so many different ways of which an approaching it. And as you've mentioned there, the consistency is really important, I'm guessing. And also maybe not taking no for an answer a little bit sometimes helps, because certainly when they've come back, a couple of these bigger brands, and said, oh no, we're not accepting applications, or it doesn't fit our criteria or whatever, I've sort of, put that to one side, and then a couple of months later down, or 6 months later down the line, sent a similar email or contacted them by a different channel, and actually been successful with it. And they've said, oh,
Yeah,
actually,
yeah,
great. We'd love to take you on as a brand partner, or, send you some samples or something for you to review. I think it's always worth doing that, having that follow up in place. Take the first no, and then, yeah, use it to your advantage, I think.
yeah. No, I'd absolutely agree with that. And often what can happen, maybe if you've like not had a reply, or if you've had a reply and they said no, maybe 3 months or 6 months down the line, either somebody's moved on to a different role and you've got somebody who's a bit more receptive.
Yeah,
So yeah, I think that's just good advice all round, and I know that that's got me through sort of where I am today. Where if you really, really kind of want something, you know, don't take no, or I guess don't ruminate or feel glum and down because something hasn't happened, because there will be another opportunity. And like you said, don't be afraid to kind of recontact, or just say, if you've done a bit more, particularly from my point of view, if I've been writing a bit more about their stuff, I'll maybe just drop a line and say, hey, how's it going? I don't know if you've seen, but I've put all these different stories up, whatever brand it might be, and then you'll get one back. Oh yeah, hi. Oh, and before you know it, I think, yeah, if you're showing that consistency and you're not just sort of either chasing for free product or because that's a whole different thing as well, isn't it? Where you've got influencers now, and that is definitely now become a business model,
Yeah.
and that didn't exist when I started Adventure 52 back in the day. The whole, I kind of probably brought those sort of old school editorial standards, which way back then, and the world has changed a lot in the past decade. So
Yeah. Brilliant. Cool. In terms of the blog itself, have you ever had any when you say to people, "Oh, I've started this blog and I'm doing it. I'm trying to do it as a business. This is going to be the business that I started." But do people turn around and go, what are you talking about? How is that even possible? Like in my line of work, it's within adventure, it's I get asked the question, or when you're going to get a real job, sort of thing, and trying to explain that to people is quite hard. I wonder whether it's the same within the blogosphere, whether you get that sort of kickback and you have to explain exactly how it all works.
yeah, you do. I think sometimes, like, if you've been invited on a press trip, you're around kind of like-minded people who are either YouTubers or influencers or other journalists who have been able to make it. Often journalists for a bigger publisher, they'll have probably you know 20 different titles. So if one of their titles isn't doing so well financially, you'll find another one kind of props it up. And then of course, they've got the print side of things, then they've got the online side of things, maybe
Yeah.
a big team over it. So yeah, and I'm not there yet with Adventure 52. I'm not where I want it to be. Am I doing it full time and making a full-time salary from it? No, I'm not yet. Do I know what I need to do to be able to get it to that level? Yes, but there are sort of a lot of very other bigger steps which I need to take along the way. So I think with me, it's a case of I know what I need to do, but it's kind of time and resource to make it happen. And it probably is the same for you. You can end up putting kind of a lot of late nights, burning the midnight oil. I go through phases of sort of, perhaps I'll have a week where I feel really fired up about it and make massive progress.
Yeah.
And I guess this is part of, like, if you are a bit entrepreneurial, it's I think consistency is a bit like the gym, isn't it? If you're doing a little bit each day, that's a hell of a lot better than doing one big gym session at the start of the week and then, like, you're aching for 3 days and
Yeah.
can't do anything. So I mean, from my perspective, I'm enjoying the process of where Adventure 52 is at the moment, and it gives me sort of some great opportunities. I enjoy that creative side of things. It's like a nice little kind of antidote to the day job of flying, which is quite procedural, and after a day in the Scottish weather, I'm pretty burnt out and brain dead by the time I get home from the concentration.
Yeah.
But it lets me kind of do my hobby, and I feel good if somebody's sort of come along, read one of the articles on there and got something out of it, then that's kind of like a buzz for me.
Brilliant. Fabulous. I did mention that we're going to have to come back to this, so we sort of glossed over the fact you were a pilot, and that sounds really, really exciting. How does that work? Could you've is it through your working for the magazine, the pilot magazine, that then you qualified to be a pilot, and then you took on that, and now you do it? And how did it work?
Yeah, I mean, God, I mean, anyone who wants to become a pilot, it's a tough journey,
Yeah.
and you need to be determined. It's funny, like I used to think kind of, everything in life would go smoothly, and any kind of failure or something not going right, then that was it, you've screwed up. But, uh, you know, uh, in time you realize that isn't the case. That's normal. And
Yeah.
I think for anyone who perhaps does feel like they perhaps go from one failure or things not going right to the other, believe me, you're not the only one. And yeah, it's tough. But no, I mean, I started off in the Air Force. So um, I joined the Air Cadets when I was sort of 15. I mean, I knew from a very young age, I wanted to fly. And again, I think that's why I got into hill walking. Hill walking was a way for me. I couldn't afford to fly, or I was too young, but it was a way to kind of have those amazing views that you'd see while flying, but just by hiking. And then I got kind of a scholarship and 20 hours of flying through the Air Force. Then I was sponsored through university. So I kind of did all my initial flying training through there. So yeah, so that was the initial stages. And then kind of after 9/11, and then there was all kinds of defense cuts as well, and the Air Force. And I kind of decided no, it wasn't going to be for me, this sort of military lifestyle, and left, and was like, well, what do I do next? And I went to one of sort of the travel shows in London, and there was a company that were doing these ski instructor courses. So I ended up being a ski instructor in Canada,
As
and
you do. Yeah.
as you do, and then it gets even more wacky. Then in the summer months, I worked as a postman. So, and I guess a lot of the people perhaps watching your podcast, they are seasonal workers, where maybe, I don't know, maybe they're a mountain leader or a canoe kayak instructor in the summer, and then come to the winter they go and do something else completely different. So,
Yeah.
but that worked for me. What a great job. I look back now, actually being a postman was awesome. Kept you fit, and
Yeah.
you're finished by kind of lunchtime, and then you could do whatever you needed to do.
Yeah.
Great little
Yeah.
job. And then I guess all the way through, I've had this ambition to kind of finish off the flying. So I did some hour building in New Zealand. And again, that was through kind of a professional studies loan. Then the banks sort of stopped lending the money because after 9/11, the airline industry had a crash.
Yeah.
And the banks were saying it's too high risk. So I was then kind of stuck. I'd did a good chunk of hour building. And then that kind of tied in then with when I got into journalism and was working for Pilot Magazine. So that was a great way for me to kind of stay involved in aviation and trickle feed and keep the hours coming along. And then, of course, sort of Adventure 52 has given me a bit of money towards going towards the flying. And then it was about kind of 3 years ago, I kind of finally found a way financially to get there. I'd heard of a scheme called the Wings Alliance, and they kind of mentored me through the process. So I think you spend a lot of money. So it's cost me £80,000 to get my
Wow.
commercial pilot's license. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
So when you're kind of that's over the period of since I've been 20 years, but
Yeah.
the last chunk of it probably cost £50,000, and you're spending that kind of money and thinking, okay, there's no guarantee of a job after this.
Yeah.
And that's why the Wings Alliance gave me kind of a bit of that reassurance that somebody had my back, and they'd help you out with getting the right contacts for the airlines and such like.
Yeah.
And then yeah, they were asking me, oh, what do you fancy doing? And I was sort of talking about the different flying roles that I'd seen or companies. And then I just mentioned, oh, actually, I quite fancy doing something like the Twin Otter. They've got one, it lands on the beach at Barra in the Outer Hebrides. So I think that'd be a brilliant job. And anyway, the guy said, oh, well, actually, I do a bit of work with Loganair. Send me your CV and I'll, just find out whether they're recruiting. And then next day I get an email from Loganair saying, do you want to come up for an interview?
Wow.
So I was like, okay. and went up to Dundee, and they had a simulator there, and they kind of do an interview, put you in the simulator with somebody else who's also on the selection. Then they just, ask a bit about kind of what you fancy flying. And initially, they offered me another aircraft type, which was going to be based at Aberdeen. And I kind of went back to them and said, "Oh, but I kind of really wanted the twin otter. You mentioned there was a position there." And then, a few hours later, he came back and said, "Yeah, cool, okay, we can do that. Can you start next month?"
Oh,
Yeah,
so good.
yes, I can.
Yeah, 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 brilliant. If you don't ask, you don't get. Oh, that's
There
fantastic.
is, do you know what? I think throughout the theme of this interview, there is an element of that.
Mm,
Um, I think you've got to be careful, like how you go about asking, because I think, I get the impression some days people, the way that they ask for things, or I think the key thing I think is just like showing interest and keenness and enthusiasm,
yeah,
and that goes a long way. I think if you ask too directly, that puts people off. But if you kind of show that you're genuine and you're interested, then that
yeah,
opens doors, definitely.
yeah. Top tip. That is
Um,
a top tip. Hey, okay. I want to be respectful of your time, Dan. So at the end of each podcast, I've got 3 questions that I like to ask. Just keep a bit of continuity throughout each episode. So the first question is, what piece of advice would you give to yourself 10 years ago?
we touched on it earlier. I think I'd say roll with the punches and don't see things not going right as being kind of a failure, and like that you're not going to get anywhere, because actually the things that go wrong are the biggest teachers, and you learn from it, and then just take that experience and move on. And I tell myself to not ruminate on things, like rumination, like going over things or thinking what if it had been different. Just I've got better over the years. I was pretty, when I was young, I'd just go over things too much. So yeah, stop the rumination.
Brilliant, brilliant. So question number 2, what valuable resource, this, for example, it can be a book, a YouTube channel, piece of equipment, blog, podcast, app, or other, can you recommend to help others following a similar path to you?
Cool. Well, for the flying, I'd say check out the Wings Alliance. Just type Wings Alliance into Google. They're kind of based alongside sort of Bristol Ground School. And get in touch with those guys. Even if you just know nothing about flying, drop them a line, say, this is who you are, what you want to do, and they will just look after you. In terms of sort of adventure things, I'll show you actually. This book I've probably read, Mountain Craft and Leadership. I'm not
Oh,
sure if it's,
classic.
but you know it, Tom. Cool.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, you can see the bits I've earmarked. I'm a firm believer in like skilling up, and this is sort of a Bible. I'd also say kind of learn how to map read. If you're into adventure, learn how to map read, learn how to use a compass, and get really bloody good at it, because that will just give you the confidence to get out there. I think any kind of adventure, if you kind of think of a place where you've seen photos, this is what happens these days, isn't it? People see like a photo on Instagram and think, oh, I want to go there. Well, my first bit of advice is get the map, buy the map for where that is, and then open the map up and look, and just, that will just transform the way that you plan and make things happen. And then finally, I guess kit wise, there's lots of different brands out there, but for me, like mountain equipment is just so good. Like the quality, it stands the test of time, and it really works.
Yeah. And given that you're using these up in Scotland, I'm sure people will take a lot of faith, yeah, and in what you're saying there. So question number 3, what would you like to see change about the industry you're in? So that could be the adventure industry, it could be the blogging industry. I'll leave that up to you.
Oh, really good question. I think for me, I've got to where I am because of like those early opportunities. So through organisations like the Cubs, the Scouts, the Air Cadets, and even like at school through these sort of outward bound courses. And I think, it's a bit of a tragedy at the moment. I know outdoor schools and centres across the country are really, really sort of struggling for survival. But that I'm just worried there's sort of generations of people who kind of aren't going to have that experience in their early lives. And I mean, it has with mine, a lot of the skills I've got, not just in terms of the mountaineering skills, but in terms of all of the social skills, the leadership skills, being able to kind of work with people, kind of come about from doing those things. So that's one big thing I'd like to see change, is to perhaps see a bit more government support and help for those schools.
Brilliant. Well, that is good to hear. I'm totally on board. Well, it's been fabulous chatting with you, Dan, and you've had an absolutely fascinating journey to where you are, and best of luck with your website. If people want to get in contact with you, where's the best place to do that and find out a bit more about what you're up to?
Yeah, you can head to www.adventure52.com, and that's adventure52, the numbers. Or you can find me on Instagram, Dan Tye, TYE. Just drop me a message, drop me an email.
Wonderful. Thanks for your time. I'm sure, hopefully, we can do a little round two a little bit further down the line, see how you're getting on. But yeah, thanks again. Cheers, Dan.
Cheers, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you. If you've enjoyed this podcast and want to hear the next one, please subscribe. Please share the podcast with your friends and followers. You can also find the Adventure Pro podcast on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Adventure Pro Pod.